Welcome back to Echoes of Ihsan. And today, we're taking a deep dive into the Muwatta Imam Malik,
Specifically, Book 25.
which focuses on game.
Yes, hunting and eating animals according to Islamic law.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. This is a look at the ethical side of things and also the practical application of these ancient rulings, right?
Exactly.
Like imagine yourself going back in time and you're in the wilderness or you're sailing across the sea
Right.
and you've just successfully hunted or come across, some bounty, so to speak.
Yeah.
How do you even begin to determine what's okay to eat?
Right.
So that's what we're going to unpack in this deep dive. We'll look at what the early Islamic scholars thought about these scenarios.
Yeah, so the Muwatta Imam Malik was compiled in the 8th century
By Imam Malik.
by Imam Malik, of course, and it's like one of the foundational texts of Islamic jurisprudence.
Yeah.
And it's revered for its collection of hadith, which are the sayings and practices of the Prophet Muhammad. Peace and blessings be upon him, and also the opinions of early Islamic scholars.
Okay, so let's get started then with the first part, and that is hunting with throwing sticks,
Stones.
stones and arrows.
Arrows. Yeah.
What does the Muwatta say about that?
So it opens with an account of Abdullah ibn Umar,
Oh, Ibn Umar, okay.
who was a companion of the Prophet.
Prominent companion.
Yes, very prominent, known for his piety and really trying to adhere to the Prophet's teachings.
Okay.
So he found himself in Al-Jaruf, a place near Medina, and he struck two birds with a stone.
Okay, so you hit two birds with a stone.
Yeah, one died instantly. The other one was injured.
Okay.
So what's interesting is he threw away the one that died from the stone,
Oh, wow.
but the injured one, he tried to slaughter with an adze, but it died before he could do that. So he discarded that one too.
So it's not just the act of killing. It seems like there's something deeper,
Exactly.
a principle behind all this.
So his actions really show the importance of intention. And the method used in hunting, it kind of suggests that even if an animal is killed, if the method isn't correct according to Islam, then it may not be permissible to eat it.
Oh, so there were nuances and considerations even back then, huh?
Yes, absolutely. So we move on to Al-Qasim ibn Muhammad,
Okay.
a very renowned scholar of Islamic law in Medina.
Okay.
And he disapproved of eating game that was killed with throwing sticks and clay pellets.
Interesting.
So it seems to be a bit of a stricter interpretation.
Yeah.
But it probably comes from, wanting to ensure a quick and humane kill,
Yeah.
minimize the animal's suffering.
Right.
And that's a recurring theme throughout Islamic teachings.
Okay, yeah, minimizing harm.
Yeah, and then we have a contrasting opinion from Sa'id ibn al-Musayyab,
Okay.
another respected scholar. And he particularly disapproved of hunting methods meant for wild game if they were used on domesticated animals that had reverted to a wild state.
So the animal's origin matters,
Exactly.
and its nature matters.
Yeah, so it suggests there's kind of a hierarchy in the permissibility based on the animal, right? So wild game is different than a domesticated animal that's become wild.
Okay.
And it probably has to do with, their wild instincts and behaviors and things like that.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. So these are interesting opinions, but are they just like interpretations? Or is there a basis for these rulings in the Quran and Sunnah?
Yeah, I mean, the rulings are often based on the Quran and Sunnah, right?
Yeah.
So the consumption of game through certain methods is supported by verse 5.97 of the Quran.
Which says,
O you who believe, Allah will surely try you with something of the game that your hands and spears attain.
so it's clear there that the Quran does allow eating game that is obtained in certain ways.
Right, so hands, spears, or weapons that pierce vital organs.
Okay.
And that goes back to making sure the kill is clean and quick and minimizes suffering.
It's all about minimizing the suffering of the animal.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so the Muwatta also talks about this idea of certainty in the kill. So what happens if you hit the animal, but other things could also cause its death?
Yeah,
So, for example, you shoot an animal and it falls into the water and drowns.
right.
So what's the ruling on that?
They emphasized the need for certainty.
Okay.
So if something like water or an untrained dog contributed to the death, then you can't eat it. Unless you're absolutely sure that your arrow or spear hit a vital organ
Okay.
and it died right away.
So you can't just assume.
No, you can't assume. You can't have doubts.
Right.
It has to be, for sure.
So it's about taking responsibility for the animal's life.
Exactly.
Okay. And then there's this interesting rule about leaving game overnight.
Yes.
So if you shot the animal but haven't seen it die,
Right.
you can still eat it if you find signs like dog marks or an arrow. as long as it hasn't been left overnight.
Yeah.
So why is there this specific time frame?
It probably comes from concerns about hygiene
Okay, makes sense.
and decomposition.
Right.
Because if you leave it overnight, there's a chance it will be contaminated and go bad.
Right. And you don't want to jeopardize your health.
Exactly. So it's a practical consideration.
Yeah.
But also a spiritual guidance, right?
It's both.
Yeah.
So these guidelines show us a very holistic way of interacting with the world around us.
Right.
It's about balancing our need to live with the need to treat creation with respect
Exactly.
and minimize any harm.
For sure.
And that's a key element of Islamic teachings, reminding us that our actions have both physical consequences,
Right?
but also spiritual implications.
Yeah.
Really interesting stuff.
Yeah. Now let's move on to hunting with trained animals.
Okay, yeah. So how does using animals to hunt affect whether or not you can eat what they catch?
Yeah, so this is where the Muwatta gets into the specifics, especially with dogs.
Right, because dogs were commonly used for hunting back then.
Yeah, exactly. And there are different opinions from the scholars about what's allowed.
Okay, so like what?
Well, Abdullah ibn Umar, remember him?
Yeah, the one who was super careful about everything.
Yeah, exactly. So he said that if a trained dog catches an animal, you can eat it.
Okay.
Doesn't matter if the dog ate from it or not.
Oh, interesting. So it doesn't become haram just because the dog took a bite?
Right. The main thing is that the dog is trained and listens to the handler.
So the hunter is still in control.
Yeah, that's the idea.
It's like the dog is an extension of the hunter, sort of.
Exactly.
So their intentions are what matter.
Right. And then there's Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas.
Okay. Another companion of the Prophet.
Yeah, he was known for being really wise.
Got it. What does he say?
So he takes it a step further. He says that even if only a little bit of the animal is left, you can still eat it.
Oh, wow. So even if the dog ate most of it,
Yeah.
that's interesting. Why do you think that is?
I think it's about not wasting anything,
Makes sense.
being practical and respectful of the animal.
Okay, yeah. So you're not just throwing away a perfectly good animal just because the dog got to it first.
Right.
It's about being resourceful.
Exactly.
So this whole thing about using trained animals for hunting, it's not just about dogs, right?
You're right. The Muwatta talks about other animals, too.
Like what?
Falcons, eagles, hawks, that kind of thing.
Okay.
As long as they're trained to hunt for the handler, you can eat the game they catch.
So it all comes down to training.
And the control of the handler.
Got it.
Yeah.
So the animal's basically a tool, right?
Yeah, you could say that.
An extension of the hunter's skill.
But there's a really important distinction here.
What's that?
If you just take the animal from the hunting animal after it's already dead, you can't eat it.
Okay.
Especially if you could have slaughtered it yourself while it was still in the hunting animal's grasp.
So you have to be the one to actually kill it.
Yeah, you have to actually do the slaughtering yourself for it to be halal.
So it's not enough to just like send the dog out and then take the animal when it comes back.
Right. You have to take responsibility for the kill yourself.
Okay, so that makes sense. What about if, let's say, a Muslim is using a hunting dog that belongs to a non-Muslim?
Okay, yeah. The Muwatta talks about that too. It says that's allowed as long as the dog is trained and the Muslim is the one who sends it out to hunt.
So even though the dog has a non-Muslim owner, the Muslim can still eat the game it catches.
Yeah, but there's one condition.
What's that?
The Muslim has to be the one to slaughter the animal.
Ah, okay. So it all comes back to that act of slaughtering.
Exactly. That's what makes it halal.
So it's not about who owns the dog, but who performs the slaughter.
Right.
Really fascinating stuff.
It is. This whole section on trained animals is really thought-provoking, isn't it?
Yeah, it makes you think about all these different angles.
Like, how do you balance ethical considerations with the practicalities of hunting?
Exactly.
And it all comes back to those core principles of Islam, like intention and minimizing harm.
Yeah, so even though you're using animals, you're still making sure that everything stays within the boundaries of halal. Okay, now this next part is kind of a curveball. It talks about using the skins of animals that have died naturally.
Yeah, it's about carrion skins. It might seem a little out there, but it shows how Islamic rulings are practical and spiritual at the same time.
Okay, what does it say exactly?
Well, it starts with a story about the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. He saw one of his companions who had a dead sheep, and he asked him, "Aren't you going to use its skin?"
Okay.
And the companion was like, "But it's carrion."
Right.
And the Prophet said, "Only eating it is haram."
So even though the sheep died naturally, you can still use its skin for something.
Exactly. It's a really important distinction. You can't eat carrion, but you can use other parts of the animal.
Oh, that's interesting. I never thought of it that way.
It's about minimizing waste and making the most of what you have.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like honoring the animal, even in death.
Exactly. You're not just throwing it away, you're using what you can.
That makes sense. But wouldn't you need to purify the skin somehow if it came from an animal that wasn't slaughtered Islamically?
Yeah, good question. The Muwatta says that tanning purifies the skin.
Tanning.
Yeah, it's a process of treating the skin to preserve it.
Right.
And that process is considered purifying, so you can use the skin after that.
Okay, so it's not just about avoiding waste, it's also about taking steps to make sure the skin is pure.
Exactly. It's practical and spiritual, all rolled into one.
So was this something that people actually did back then?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Aisha, the prophet's wife, said that the prophet told them to use carrion skins after they'd been tanned.
Oh, wow, so it was common practice.
Yeah, and her account shows how these teachings were passed down, especially by women.
Right, so it wasn't just something that men did.
Exactly. It was part of everyday life for everyone.
I like how this section shows that Islamic teachings aren't just about rules, but about living in harmony with nature.
Absolutely. It's about respecting resources and being mindful of what we use.
Yeah. Okay, now let's get to the last part of Book 25, which is about eating carrion out of necessity.
Okay, yeah, this is a tough one. It's about what happens if you're starving and the only option is to eat carrion.
It's hard to imagine being in that situation.
Yeah, it's definitely an extreme scenario.
So what does the Miwata say about that?
Well, it gives some pretty clear guidelines.
Like what?
It says that you should only eat enough to satisfy your hunger, not more than that.
So you're not taking advantage of the situation, you're just trying to survive.
Right. It's about survival, not indulgence. And it also says that you should take some provisions with you, just enough to last until you can find something else to eat.
So you're planning ahead.
Yeah, exactly. You're trying to get back to eating halal food as soon as possible.
Got it. So you're not just like, oh, I can eat carrion now, so that's what I'm going to do forever.
Right, it's a temporary thing.
And what happens when you do find other food?
You have to stop eating the carrion.
Okay, so it's not like it becomes permanently allowed just because you had to do it once.
Exactly. It goes back to being haram.
Now, what if you come across other food sources, like crops or livestock, that belong to someone else?
Ah, that's where it gets even more complicated.
Yeah, because now you have to balance your survival with someone else's property.
Right, so Imam Malik talks about that. He says that if you think the owners would understand your situation, you can eat what you need to survive, but don't take any extra.
Okay,
But he really emphasizes that you shouldn't steal, even if you're about to die.
so in that case, it would be better to eat the carrion than to risk stealing.
Yeah, but he also says that if you're afraid of being accused of stealing, then it's okay to eat the carrion.
Wow, that's a tough call.
It is. It's about weighing your options and trying to make the best decision in a really difficult situation.
It's like you're caught between a rock and a hard place.
Exactly.
But it's interesting how Islam gives you guidance, even in those extreme cases.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that life is complex and sometimes there are no easy answers.
Right, but there are principles that can help you navigate those tough choices.
Exactly.
So we've reached the end of our deep dive into the Muwatta Imam Malik's Book 25.
On game. Yeah.
And it's amazing how these rulings, even though they're, from so long ago, they still feel relevant today when we talk about things like animal welfare
Right.
and sustainability.
It's like they were really ahead of their time in a way.
Yeah.
Like thinking about the ethics of how we treat animals and the environment.
Yeah, for sure.
Like take the idea of a quick and painless kill, right?
Yeah.
That's something that people care about a lot these days.
It's a big part of animal welfare.
Exactly.
Minimizing suffering, being respectful to animals.
Those are universal values.
Yeah, it's not like they just came up with those ideas recently.
And it's been part of Islamic tradition for centuries.
Right, and the Muwatta even talks about using resources responsibly, like even using carrion skins,
Yeah, that's about sustainability.
which is such a big issue today.
Definitely.
We have to think about minimizing waste, using what we have.
It's about being mindful of our impact on the planet.
Absolutely.
And the Muwatta doesn't just say you can use any animal for anything, right?
Right.
Like, it talks about how some animals have specific purposes.
Yeah, like the riding animals.
Yeah, it's not all about whether or not we can eat them.
Right. They have their own roles to play.
It's like a different way of looking at things.
It is. It makes you think about our place in the world
Yeah,
and our responsibility to
Yeah.
other living beings.
exactly.
Yeah.
Not just using them for our own benefit.
Right. So as we wrap up here, I'm wondering, how can we apply all this to our own lives today?
That's the big question.
Yeah.
Like, how can we make better choices about what we eat?
Yeah. And how can we be more compassionate, more respectful towards animals and the environment?
It's about taking these principles and making them a part of our daily lives.
It's a challenge.
It is, but it's a worthwhile one. It's
Yeah.
about going beyond just following rules.
Right. It's about understanding the deeper meaning behind them.
Exactly.
So thank you for joining us on this journey through the Muwatta Imam Malik.
Yeah, it's been a great discussion.
It has. And we hope it's giving you something to think about.
Yeah, maybe even inspire you to learn more.
Yeah, for sure. Until next time, may your journey be filled with echoes of Ihsan.
Peace be upon you.